Good evening, members of council. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome any viewers on YouTube. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Codwell First Nation of the Three Fires Confederacy and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that the Huron, Wendat, and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced the stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of the other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. If we can have a moment of silent reflection, and then we'll stand to sing "O Canada." Thank you. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any disclosures of conflict of interest? Councillor Carrick.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. On the item E1, Malden Road EA addendum, family business.
Okay, so noted. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held September 14th, 2021 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Reno, second by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Mayor's comments. On September 17th, we held the official swearing-in ceremony of LaSalle Chief of Police Duncan Davies. The administration of the oaths of office were led by the Honorable Justice Maria Caracia from the Ontario Supreme Court of Justice. It was an honor to be part of the ceremony, and I wish Chief Davies well in his role. If you would like to watch the ceremony, the video can be found on the town's YouTube channel. With the latest announcement from the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit, the procedures are changing for patrons entering the Vollmer complex. We understand that it can be confusing and ask for your patience at this time. As of Friday, October 1st, each person aged 12 years and older who attends the indoor arena or area of the Vollmer complex must provide identification and proof of being fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or a valid medical exemption. We appreciate your cooperation, as well as we all strive to keep our families and friends safe. I would like to thank all the vendors and patrons who supported the LaSalle night market over the last few months. We look forward to continuing our night markets in 2022. I'd like to add this time, ask that with council's pleasure, if we can have a motion to defer bylaw 8613, which pertains to expropriation of sud lands at Matchett and Laurier. Council's pleasure. Councillor Akpata, seconded by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor for deferral? That carries unanimously. Thank you. So the delegates who were going to speak regarding that, we will notify you. We, being town administration, will notify you when it comes back on the agenda, and then you can speak at that time. Thank you. We have Val Development, Huron Acre Subdivision, a consultant Gudrun Beggs from Amico will be in attendance, and we have Mr. Burgess.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. The report before you tonight is with regards to the statutory public meeting and the draft plan of subdivision application, which is to allow for the development of 2 hectares of land, which will allow the creation of 9 lots, which will allow the creation of 6 single-family or single detached dwelling units, as well as 18 semi-detached dwelling units. The land is currently municipally known as 4455 and 4465 Huron Church Line Road. On August 17th, the Planning Review Committee heard from abutting property owners with some concerns with regards to drainage as well as construction traffic. Those concerns have been addressed by the developer. The development will include sidewalks on all streets, including an extension of the existing trail along Huron Church Line Road with an interconnection into the development. And if this development is approved, I would recommend that it's with the conditions outlined within the report. At this time, I'll turn it over to Gudrun Beggs at Amico, who has a presentation for council.
Thanks, Alan. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm not sure why it says Derek Amiconi. I am not Derek Amiconi, so I apologize, but my name's Gudrun Beggs and I'm here on behalf of Amico with a proposal for draft plan approval as well as the zoning bylaw amendment for, as Alan has highlighted, the Huron Acres lands. And with your permission, Mr. Mayor, is it okay if I share my screen with a very short presentation?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Let's try and get that. Is everybody able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing some nodding. Okay, so as Alan had highlighted, the proposal is for the lands known as Huron Acres. And Amico together with Val Developments in partnership with Timberland Homes, who is the home builder that was doing the development in the home building in Forest Trail Phase 2, Phase 2B, so those townhome units there, are seeking to develop the former Huron Acres site into a residential subdivision with a mix of single unit lots and semi-detached lots for a total of 24 units. A zoning bylaw amendment request to rezone the lands is being sought from the agricultural zone and the R1 zone to traditional neighborhood development, TND R1-1, as well as a draft plan of subdivision is being proposed for a mix of singles that will front Huron Church Line Road and the semi-detached blocks on the internal streets. This slide shows the site, 4465 and 4455 Huron Church Line Road, which is approximately 5.5 acres in size. This site is made up of 2 properties, essentially. It's the former Huron Acres horse riding stable, which previously operated here. And then the developer also purchased the abutting lands, which is a single family residential lot fronting on Huron Church Line Road. All of the buildings that, actually they're not shown there, but all the buildings have since been demolished. So the current official plan designation for the property is residential district. That's shown in this little square here in yellow. And the proposed zoning change is from agricultural A1 and R1, which is the designate or the zoning category for that single family residential home fronting on Huron Church Line Road. So the proposal is to change that zoning to traditional neighborhood design traditional neighborhood development residential zone TND R1-1, which is in keeping with the official plan designation of residential. This is our proposed plan of subdivision. The yellow lots are highlighted. Those are the semi-detached units, of which are 18 in total. And then we have the single family units, the single family lots that front onto Huron Church Line Road. Just wanted to highlight the sidewalk and trail plan that we're proposing. We know all the good work that the town of LaSalle is doing in terms of connectivity and pedestrian access. So we're piggybacking onto that. We're showing the sidewalks on both sides of the road, as well as the multi-use trail that we're connecting from the internal subdivision to Huron Church Line Road. That was actually a suggestion of administration that we thought was a really good idea. So we have some underground services here through block 16. So we're adding a trail system there to connect it to Huron Church Line Road. This is just a quick townhouse rendering of what's existing in Forest Trail Estates Phase 2. Those units were developed and built by Timberland Homes, and that's sort of the look and feel that we're intending to keep on the semi-detached lots in the subdivision. In terms of the servicing, the subdivisions have been designed to confirm that there's adequate capacity within the existing infrastructure to accommodate our proposal. The water services for the proposed development will be provided via the existing water line along Huron Church Line Road. The sanitary sewer along Huron Church Line Road was actually oversized to accommodate future development at this location. We're very familiar with that because I believe Amoco actually did the oversizing. And then a temporary stormwater solution has been approved in principle by the Conservation Authority in the town, whereby water will be stored on block 11 and ultimately outlets into the Forest Trail Estates pond to the north. This temporary solution will remain in place until the more permanent outlet to the south becomes available, at which time that block will revert back to a building lot. So it's our understanding that the ultimate outlet for the stormwater for the subdivision is through the adjacent property to the south, which is not yet ready to be developed. So what we're proposing to do to facilitate the development on our lands is do a temporary stormwater solution until such time as the more permanent outlet to the south becomes available. What's really nice about the proposal so far is that we've done some extensive consultation with both the Conservation Authority and the municipality to date to work together on some of these servicing constraints and items. So we're confident that our proposal is a good one. That's essentially everything that we had tonight, but we're here if council has any questions or members of the public have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open up to council questions. Councillor Carrick, Councillor Ekpada, Councillor Desjardins, then Councillor Reynolds.
Just real fast, getting back to the drainage, the block 13. Scope and size of the pond itself, for the retention pond that the water is going to be going into, or the basin, how big is that going to be, and is it more than sufficient enough for the amount of homes that are going in there, considering there's the big one across the street there with a lot more homes that have access to it? Can you give me a comparative? So
you're referring to the temporary bond on
Yes.
Block 11?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. From my understanding, and actually our engineer is on the meeting as well, so he can speak in more technical terms. But from my understanding, the temporary pond was engineered appropriately to accommodate the development as part of both the single family lots on Huron Church Line Road and the semi-detached lots within the internal subdivision. And in terms of size, I'm not exactly sure the size of the pond itself on Block 11, but I think it takes up the majority of the block.
Okay, because the region in our area, we have issues with the overflow. So I just want to make sure we're all comfortable with the size of how that is to accommodate the overflow of water that'll be going there. So maybe you, through our administration, could you comment on that as well?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, that the temporary pond is going to be outletting to the existing Forest Trails pond. The pond across the street, Councilor Carrick, that you're talking about, is for the head to board development and is completely separated from this one at this time. Ultimately, that whole block where the horse farm is and to the south does outlet to the Lapine drain, but there'll be stormwater management, bigger stormwater management infrastructure at that time. So they're separate at this time.
Okay, so we're comfortable and the report's comfortable supporting it then. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Akpata.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to a member of administration, perhaps Alan. I heard and I appreciate the fact that walkways and 2 sidewalks. How will we make sure that the persons purchasing the property are aware of this decision so that we have a smooth transition to purchase and everything goes tickety-boo?
Through you, Your Worship, I believe we would probably take a similar approach that we did with our more recent subdivision that we had before you, and be asking that the developer bring that forward to each of the owners at the time of their purchases, so that they are aware and that they are signing off on the installation of those sidewalks.
Jonathan, you want to add something?
Yeah, additionally, we'll likely follow up with the 6-month timing window that we've instituted in a couple of recent developments where get the sidewalks to go in around 6 months after the first building permit's pulled. So they're there, most of them are there before people are moved in.
Good. That'll prevent a big issue coming back. Thank you. What's that it, Councillor Akpata?
Just a supplemental to that. And obviously, Mr. Osborne, we're putting sidewalks and trails in for public safety access and to align with our active transportation plan.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. That is all.
Thank you. Now we go to Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. Just a couple of questions, please. I did have one about the sidewalk, so thank you, Councillor Akpata. Is the only access through this going to be through Forest Trail Road, and can it handle the extra traffic? I don't know if Amika wants to handle that, or Jonathan or Alan.
Through you, Your Worship, at this time, the traffic will just be going through the Forest Trails development. The intention is that when the development to the south proceeds, there will be an additional access point, and it'll actually create an interconnection all the way through to the eventual extension of Sandwich West Parkway. As far as the number of due to the number of units, which are basically the 9 lots that are being created there, we don't foresee that there will be a significant traffic issue with the development of those lots.
Okay. That's good. Thank you. And then one other, are any of these units accessible units, any of the townhouses?
I'm sorry, I'm assuming that's a question for me?
Yes, I'm thinking it's going to go through you.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'm happy to answer through you, Your Worship. At this time, we're not positive on sort of the layout and which builders are going to be building what. By accessible units, are you referring to like barrier free or? Yes. Okay. I think that all of the townhouses are designed so that they're 1 floor only and typically at grade with the front entrance, but I'm not sure whether or not some of the single families will be barrier free units that front onto Huron Church.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Renault.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question was actually covered off by Councillor Carrick. I was just looking to get an idea of how massive the pond could possibly be on 11, and it sounds like it's going to take up the majority of the block. Ms. Beggs, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think that's pretty accurate. We're hopeful that, we don't have to have this temporary pond for too long. We're looking to ultimately tie into the more permanent solution, but in the interest of getting this development moving, we're willing to put a temporary storage pond on that lot so that we can develop more in LaSalle.
Thank you. And just one other question. A pond of this size, will it need to be fenced or anything like that? Are there any plans of doing anything like that?
Sorry, is that a question for me?
Jonathan, do you want it?
Yeah,
Pardon?
through you, your worship, I can take that one. I think just to clarify, when Ms. Begg said block, it's not like an entire block you would think in a residential area. It's really just the size of a semi-detached unit lot. So it's really just one lot that the size of the pond is. So it's not very big at all. And it would not have fencing. It would be sloped in a way that's similar to our other ponds and safe that way. So no fencing on it.
And Jonathan, what kind of depth are we talking about?
I can't recall, but with the width of it and the sloping, it doesn't get overly deep either. So I don't know the exact number. We get back to you on that though.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Deputy Mayor Malash and then Councillor Dicio Spagnolo.
Thank you, Mayor Bonnie. Through you to probably Miss Beggs, I'm assuming. I'm just going to open my other screen here to look. Last time we spoke, we had one of the rear neighbors. I don't know if it was 6360 who was on the call last time, or if it was the neighbor just south of that at 6380, and they were concerned about their ditch and the drainage. Was all that addressed with them?
I believe it was. Alan, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that we responded back in writing to that particular mayor, or that particular neighbor rather. And I think he's now satisfied.
Okay.
Yes, you're correct. I believe through your engineering, you provided some comments back to the owner and they were satisfied.
Great. And then my second question would be to administration, and this is maybe something we can look at as more development comes along here in Church. We've just done the condos across the street with this, and then the additional units just south of this. Are we going to consider maybe reducing the speed limit on here in Church? I've heard concern from residents in the area with Sandwich West Parkway going 30, trying to get onto here in Church at 60. I don't know if that's something we could look at for future development or how we would handle that.
Mr. Mara?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To your question, Deputy Mayor Malash, is Huron Church Line currently exists for improvements under an environmental assessment through this section up to Sandwich West Parkway. As part of that previous environmental assessment, it is a bit dated, and it does need to be extended down further southerly along Huron Church Line to start to capture some of the recent redevelopment in and around Laurier. So we have actually been having discussions with the County of Essex because the changeover point between the county and the town's responsibility is Sandwich West Parkway. So we've been having discussions on timing of when a updated or an amendment or an addendum to the Huron Church Line environmental assessment would be carried out at that point. At those stages is when we take a look at the various operating speeds and design speeds of the road. But at this point, there is no requirements to lower the speed limit. What is currently out there is safe to operate within the confines of what is out there. And certainly as development continues to occur along Huron Church Line on both sides of Huron Church Line, there is going to be a need and a demand for improvements again for pedestrian safety, extending walkways, bike lanes, and proper bike lanes and things of that nature from what is currently out there. So there is, and including streetlights, there are some areas that don't have streetlights on here in Church Line as well. Plus, there's a missing sanitary sewer for all those houses south of this location as well. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on here in Church Line. And those are kind of the future plans of what is kind of outlined. Currently, what we know is outlined up to Sandwich West Parkway at this time for Huron Church Line, and really a need in the future to start to look at it and bring something forward to identify what those future needs are.
Thank you.
Councillor Dicio Spagnolo.
Through you to Mrs. Beggs, Deputy Mayor Malash actually asked my question. I was just wondering if the residents' concerns that they brought forward were addressed. So that was my question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good questions. And it's nice to hear that the sidewalks and trails will not be an issue, I hope. Council's pleasure. Oh, Jonathan, you have something to add?
Just to follow up with Councilor Reynolds' question, the pond is about 8 feet deep in the center. So after it slopes down, it's only about 8 feet deep. So from top grade down to the center of it.
Thank you. Okay, council's pleasure on the move by Councilor Desjardins, support Councilor Dicho Spagnolo, all in favor. That carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Beggs and Mr. Burgess.
Thank you very much.
Now we have reports E1, Malden Road Environmental Addendum Report. So just so everybody knows, it will be Mr. Mara, then we'll have Stantec, and then we'll have Mr. Mara add any points after Stantec. Then we'll go to the delegates, and then we'll go to council for questions. Mr. Mara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You took the introduction right out of my mouth for this report. So I was just going to outline that I will do a bit of opening comments regarding this, pass it over to Stantec, who will take us through a presentation. And then I have some closing comments after Stantec's presentation. And then following that, we're available for questions, and there's a couple delegations that wish to speak on this matter. So the report before you tonight, Mr. Mayor and members of council, is a milestone within the confines and in the context of the Malden Road Environmental Assessment Addendum. So this is one of the final steps to moving this environmental assessment addendum forward and finalizing it. And this is looking for tonight's recommendation is for council to receive this report and in principle approve the EA addendum, and also support and approve the issuance of the notice of study completion, which triggers a number of review periods for this. With that, I will try to share my screen, and I will pass the microphone over to Kevin Welker, who is with us from Stantec, and Paula Horner, who is also with us from Stantec, to do the presentation.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just to recognize that Councillor Carrick has declared a conflict of interest and has vacated his seat at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. I'm Kevin Welker from Stantec Consulting. We're here today to talk about the Malden Road Transportation, Public Safety, and Urban Design Improvements Class EA Addendum. Next slide, please, Peter. So essentially the agenda here, what we're looking at is a review of the 2009 Class EA study recommendations, highlight the municipal Class EA and addendum requirements, identify what's changed between 2009 and 2020, which was when the bulk of the study was completed, cover the traffic analysis and safety review, identify the recommended corridor design, and the follow-up from the public information center that was held earlier this year, and identify those next steps. So the 2009 Class EA, which essentially is the background study that was completed for this section of Malden Road, was completed by the town as well as Essex County. The preferred design at that time was summarized in the environmental study report. It identified a widening of Malden Road from 2 to 5 lanes from just north of Todd Lane to Normandy Street. It identified a widening of Malden Road to 3 lanes from south of Normandy Street to Megan Drive. Identified improvements at intersections throughout that study limit, and optimize signal timings at all the signalized intersections within the study area. So to date, as I'm sure you're aware, the only component that's been completed out of that is the 5-lane widening north of Normandy Street. Other improvements that were recommended as part of that original 2009 Class EA have not been implemented. So as a result of that length of time that's passed since the preparation of that EA in 2009, the town of LaSalle retained Stantec to complete a 10-year review of that ESR, the environmental study, or ESR, to determine if the recommendations made within that document are still relevant today. So we're looking at things like environmental changes in existing environmental conditions, changes in traffic patterns and land use, as well as updated municipal and provincial planning policies. So as a result of that, any significant modifications to that original ESR need to be captured within the addendum to the ESR. And it identifies the reasons for the change and the resulting environmental impacts and mitigation requirements. Next slide. So what has changed? The roundabout at Malden Road and Todd Lane was constructed. The streets, roadway and streetscape improvements, as I noted, were constructed in the north end. The town official plan, which now identifies Malden Road as a mixed-use corridor, was updated, as well as some revised land use and development policies. And there's been updated traffic information, traffic volumes, as well as supporting documents, the transportation and active transportation master plan, as well as the county-wide active transportation master plan. So as part of this project, we completed a traffic study for the area. It looked at a multitude of things, the existing multimodal transportation network facilities. We captured new traffic volumes in 2019. We looked at intersection capacity operations for those existing conditions, those updated traffic volumes. We captured new collision history for the 5-year period from 2014 to 2019, looking at both intersections as well as mid-block links. We reassessed the geometry of the intersections within the study area. And the major change is we projected future roadway traffic conditions, so new traffic volumes to 2041. We then looked at the recommended alternatives from 2009, as well as the active transportation components. I should note as well there, we did use growth rates for the development of these off of these existing traffic volumes using the rates identified in the transportation master plan. So you can see Malden Road has available capacity in the study corridor during the morning peak hour, and this image shows the afternoon peak hour. We have approaching capacity in the southbound lanes of Malden. So the V over C, which is really just volume to capacity, it's identifying essentially how much capacity that cross section of the road has. Basically, approaching the number one, we're sort of heavily congested, I guess is a good way to put it. Next slide. So out of this, we looked at several alternatives, sort of reassessed those that were within the original report. So we looked at do nothing. We looked at simple network extensions. So the extension of Realm Road east to Huron Church, and the extension of Ellis Street south to Diot. We also looked at what was originally recommended in the 2009 report, including those planned extensions, and did a sensitivity analysis to see if that 4-lane cross section would be triggered. It wasn't, so we ended up recommending, or are recommending, the 3-lane cross section, essentially that was previously recommended, with some changes to the active transportation component, as well as the planned extensions as noted here. So essentially, to highlight that, the recommended alternative solutions from 2009 are generally still applicable. And I will touch on the third bullet point. But essentially widening Malden Road between Cahill Drain and Megan Drive to a 3-lane cross section. So that's retains the one general purpose lane in each direction and adds a 2-way center left turn lane continuous for the corridor. Signalizing the Huron Road intersection and protecting for that future extension to the east. We identified a realignment and signalization of the Bouffard Road intersection to create a continuous east-west corridor, so realigning the east side, as well as implementing pedestrian crosswalks and multi-use trails near Cahill Drain to improve that east-west connection and provide a safe alternative route for cyclists to move around the commercial section between Normandy Street and Todd Lane. So following our public meeting period, information did come to light regarding the realignment and signalizing of Bouffard. We originally identified that as being part of the 2009 ESR. That was incorrect. It was originally part of the recommendations, but during the 30-day review period, it was bumped up and ultimately removed from that ESR documentation. Our analysis, our updated traffic analysis, does show poor operational performance at this intersection, predominantly because of that revised timeline from 2021, which the 2009 projected volumes to 2041, which is what we projected the traffic volumes to. So we are recommending the realignment to the east to resolve those issues. Upon notification of that by the property owner of that error, we did reach out to MECP, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, to seek guidance on how to address that. So we did reach out, we got that guidance, and we've followed their guidance since that point in time. So this slide just captures sort of the summary of the corridor. It really highlights those future road extensions, as I mentioned there in the middle of the screen, Huron, the Diot extension to the north-south as well, which parallels Malden, and identifies the new signalized intersections at Bouffard and Huron, as well as the realignment of Bouffard on the east side of Malden. This image identifies what that extension or realignment of Bouffard is proposed to look like on the east side of Malden. So Malden is running north, south, or top to bottom in this particular shot, and the Bouffard realignment is shown on the east side, as noted. So ongoing discussions have been occurring with one resident related to that preferred treatment at the Bouffard Road intersection. So we did do a comparison between what was completed in the 2009 EA traffic analysis and the 2020 or 2021 traffic analysis. And this sort of highlights that the 2009 EA completed their traffic counts in 2008 and projected to 2021. Ours were completed in 2019 and projected to 2041, so a much longer time frame. We did identify 22 collisions that occurred at the Bouffard Road East intersection in the 5-year period from 2014 to 2019. No specific collision history was identified in that 2009 EA at that intersection. And I would note that the collisions are an indicator of an issue there. They weren't actually, because of their timing, were not actually considered in the traffic signal warrant analysis at that intersection. The 2009 EA anticipated a level of service, or LOS, which is really just an indicator of how the transportation facility is functioning from a user perspective. So a level it measured is generally A to F, with A being really free flow conditions, C being stable flow conditions, And F is essentially traffic jam type conditions, very, very stagnant flow. So that 2009 EA anticipated a level of service at Bouffard Road west of F and Bouffard Road east as F as well by 2021. So our current traffic analysis does show that those intersections are operating a little better than anticipated. They're at level of service D on the westerly leg and B on the easterly leg. So that is certainly a difference as noted here. A do nothing approach with the other network extensions. So basically, if we don't make any improvements to Malden, but the other network extensions do go through, indicates that there will be a level of service F on Bouffard Road West and a level of service C for Bouffard Road East in the 2041 timeframe. So implementing the recommended alternative does improve that intersection operations to A, or essentially that free flow condition that we were talking about. The recommended cycling facility along the corridor is on-road buffered bike lanes with separated sidewalks. So the sidewalks are shown outside the boulevard area. The bike lanes are buffered by a 1 meter flush area with a 1.5 meter bike lane. One of the options, and this can be established during the detailed design phase, that could be treatments for that buffer area. It could be a planter box option. It could be flexible bollards, or it could be precast curb mounted flexible bollards, as you can see in those the images on the right side of the screen. The next few slides just show sort of in plan view what the corridor would look like starting from the very south end. This is the transition back to the existing cross section just south of Megan Drive. The orange line where dashed line shows the new property limits, and the cyan line, colored line for the new property limits for the side roads with the existing in that darker blue. So you can see the two-way center turn lane does at intersections convert to a single direction left turn lane. Next slide does show that transition at the south end, as well as the Laurier Parkway intersection. So I should note here that we do have a slight northerly shift in Laurier Parkway to address the kink that exists in that alignment now. And the traffic signals that currently exist would be retained in at that location, but modified to deal with the revisions that we were making there. I did highlight this Bouffard Road East realignment as well. Again, we've sort of shifted. Malden Road is going top to bottom on the screen here instead of left to right. So we did capture that, but again, note the signals. And then here at this, thanks, Peter. This location identifies Hollinger, Riom, and Stewart intersections essentially, as well as the others that are within the area. Riom is signalized, does identify that future extension to the east, which goes towards the bottom of the page, as well as turn lanes located on Riom eastbound as well. So ultimately, the eastbound right turn would become an eastbound through right once the extension is established in the future. The northern section, again, just identifies the normal treatments, the two-way center left turn, which provides access to the properties along the corridor. And then this identifies the trail connection on the sort of the right side in the lighter gray or white color there to kind of close that connection that exists, as well as the pedestrian crosswalk facility just north of the Cahill drain there. So we did receive a total of 89 comments following the PIC. So the PIC was really posted. It was posted on PlaceSpeak between December 21st, 2020 and February 5th, 2021. We received comments through email, telephone, and the Place Speak discussion board. So this does provide a summary of those comments, which captured the implementation of crosswalks and separated active transportation facilities, suggestion to add traffic calming measures, improvements to the active transportation were needed along Malden, and provide dedicated or designated active transportation facilities, as we've noted here, and connection to local trails, which again, the project does include. Impacts to traffic flow as a result of the intersection improvements, suggestion to consider roundabouts over traffic signals where feasible. We did do a roundabout assessment through this corridor, and they do have significant property impacts throughout in the two locations where signals were identified. A need to protect the existing natural environment, including species at risk in wooded areas, and consideration for bus shelters and street trees, so street furniture. So the recommended improvements along Malden Road do address the comments brought forward. In addition to those, as I did note, town staff have been addressing questions from impacted property owners, as well as the one specific property owner concern regarding the Bouffard realignment, which remains partially unresolved. The concern has been addressed through MECP in terms of how to move forward with the Class EA addendum process. Although, we certainly understand that the desire to resolve that outside of that process. So the next steps for this project really are to obtain council resolution to approve issuance of the notice of study completion and start the 30-day public review period, as Peter noted. Once approved, the project could move forward towards property acquisition, detailed design of the corridor improvements, and construction phase, obviously subject to funding and approvals.
Thank you.
And
Peter, back to you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, just trying to get sorted out through all the screens here, but certainly thank you, Mr. Welker, for the presentation. As council, as I noted, this is one of the milestones, and as Mr. Welker indicated, with council's approval tonight, this will work our way through finalizing the various reports to make them available to the general public, and also issuing the notice of study completion, which is a formal process through the Environmental Assessment Act, and put this on a 30-day review period. There is some time for that to occur, and then, as noted in the council report, the MECP also has some time to review after the expiry of the 30-day period. As Mr. Welker had indicated, the consultation for this process was extensive through the Environmental Assessment Act. As we had public information center, we had extensive communication through social media. All the people on Malden Road received a mailing when the notice of study completion or the study commencement occurred. And so that was direct mail to all the people on Malden Road. A number of people who were directly impacted with some significant property impacts did receive notifications via courier to ensure that they did receive it. And furthermore, with respect to the time period of when we had the public consultation open for public review from the end of December to the beginning of February, we also had variable message boards set up on the road that displayed there was improvements to visit the website and learn more about it. So we have done everything that we could possibly do with respect to trying to get the word out. I know we have worked closely with Ms. Hadre on trying to get this out in mailouts and inserts and things of that nature. So we were doing what we could to communicate this out in the absence of a local paper. On the financial implications, this is an extensive improvement. So certainly what you see there solely for the Malden Road improvements, this does not include any of the extensions of DOT or REAM. It is a overall estimated $21 million project. It is a significant project for the town of LaSalle in means of what is required, and that does not include property acquisition. We do understand that there is a really big need and a desire to have the improvements done from Ream Road northerly. And that is really going to be our primary focus for what we refer to as a phase one, trying to bring this forward in future budgets for council to approve future budgets to move forward with certainly the work up to Ream Road and including the Ream Road intersection to really bring this forward as a phase one. Beyond Ream Road, as you can see from some of the diagrams, there is some constraints and some congestion, but it's really going to be driven a lot by development that occurs in that Howard Bouffard area. And as you know, we have a number of drainage studies and drainage struggles that we're trying to deal with in Howard Bouffard. So we're trying to solve some of those drainage concerns for ultimate development out there. And certainly there is going to be a desire at that point when those houses and that development starts to occur around the Volmer, back in behind the Ream extension to Sandros Parkway and around Bouffard and Laurier. There is going to be a need to carry that further south for future improvements, but certainly that's going to be really driven on our development. So with that, Mr. Mayor, as I noted, the recommendation before you tonight is for council to approve the current receive the current report and approve in principle the current EA addendum report and the summary that was provided to you, that was based on the summary that was provided to you, and approval of the issuance of the notice of study completion. So with that concludes my presentation. Mr. Mayor, if there's any questions or if you wish to go to delegations, now's the time.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. I think we'll now go to Mr. Ayatona. He's the #1 delegate. And then we have written, and I believe attending via Zoom, the second delegate. So Mr. Ayatona, if you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. The block car presentation this evening is going to be done by the homeowner, Mr. Pizzuoli, so I'll turn it over to him.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for allowing me to address you this evening. When I last appeared before you in July, we reminded you of the commitment that you as a town had made to me. The commitment was clear and unconditional. The town confirmed to me, the area residents, in writing, and I quote, "The offset intersections will be function as well as other offset intersections in the corridor. These changes will be incorporated into the final design of the improvement project. I relied on this commitment, and you again reinforced the commitment when you issued me a permit to build a substantial 3-car garage on my property. So the facts remain as they have from the beginning. Because of the facts, you must uphold your word as a town and as individuals in representing the town. To do otherwise, you would be an admission that you knowingly lied to me and the other residents in 2009. It would be an admission that you are continuing to lie to me today. It would also be an admission that you knowingly lied to the Ministry of Environment. Your intention is not to realign in the intersection. I will simply not sit back and watch the town go back on its word. I will not stand by and have the town run over me in this attempt to put forward what is now seems to have been a hidden agenda all along. I will not allow the town to bully me into submission, and that is indeed the case, the intent. It is unconscionable that you have placed me in this position. I should be able to rely on you and your word. Your citizens should be able to rely on the word, you and your word. I should be able to rely on the word of the professionals who are employed with the town and those the town contracts with. These professionals have been periodically disappointing. I took them at their word as well, which clearly was a mistake on my part. Since the town council does not appear that it will address the misrepresentations of the facts, I will be pursuing directly with the Professional Engineers Association. The actions of those engineers, both past and present, representing the town, Dillon, the county, and Stantec. Council chose to defer the matter at the previous July evening through. I fully expected the town to commit to me and uphold at the meeting. Council chose to defer the matter, and I was willing to help the town, meet with the town and administration. I was willing to help the town find an alternative to realigning Bouffard. However, what I received from administration, draft documents that showed no real intention of considering anything other than a realignment. The documents are one-sided, lack information, and are significantly redacted. The redacted portions appear to be communications between the town, the current consultant, Stantec, and the ministry. If the town is supposed to be dealing with me in an open and transparent matter, this would suggest otherwise. Obviously, there's information that the town wants to cover up and does not want me to have. I have certainly lost trust in what I'm being told. I want to be clear that the town has caused the trust to be lost. I did not create the situation, the town did. You freely and unconditionally committed to me that Bouffard would not be realigned. My expectation remains that you will honor your commitment. In recent weeks, I've had the opportunity to speak with a number of residents in the area who are concerned about increased traffic on Bouffard. All who I spoke with said they were unaware until recently that the town was doing this. Some said they even already had bad experiences with the town. The constant message was that the town was not being opened and not treating them fairly. You have one chance this evening to do the right thing. I expect you to do the right thing and not approve the realignment at Malden. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And otherwise, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pizzulli. Do we have delegate number 2 available?
Mr. Mayor, you may have to say the name so they realize who.
Oh,
number
okay.
2
I'm
is.
sorry. It's Leah Derek.
Yes, I'm present. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Leah,
Okay. Did you want to speak, or I know you did a written submission?
very good. And would you like to read it first, and then I'll just give my quick comment?
Well, I know all members of council have it and have read it. So if there's anything else you want to speak to, or do you want to?
Okay, my concern is, well, and I'm concerned as to what the presenter had stated, that we're going to, after this period, we're going to be going into the 30-day notice period. So I would think that would be happening first. My concern was, although we're stating, and as Mr. Morris said, that you did a lot of public consultation, I followed all of the public consultation regarding the potential changes for Malden Road, and I saw the different explanations as to what the potentials were. The straightening of Bouffard Road was not readily apparent. Neither was the straightening of Laurier. It wasn't readily apparent in all the pictures that you posted as to what was happening with Malden Road. That Bouffard Road intersection was not included. So my concern is just recently Malden Road had the radar checks as to speed. And the other presenter stated that at 8 a.m. the traffic is already at the max. So how is straightening a road going to stop the issues with traffic? If there weren't issues, you probably wouldn't be putting up that radar check. So my issue is that, you know, these disjointed roads help prevent speeding. So how will straightening this road increase public safety? The road is already at maximum in the morning. So are you also going to, in the future, widen the road? Because once you've straightened it, you're going to have even more people on it. Those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to ask, well, I know I'm going to ask Mr. Mara. There were some strong comments made by Mr. Pizzulli about redaction. We lied to them, and misinformation was put forward. I think before we go to questions, can you comment on some of those highlights, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Mr. Welker indicated, and as we discussed on the July 13th council meeting, when this delegation was brought forward, there was a mistake on our part when we originally looked at what was approved as part of the 2009 EA. That is acknowledged, and we recognize that the realignment of Buford was not carried through in the finalized EA in 2009. When that was brought to our attention, we immediately paused, sought information from the Ministry of the Environment, and went back and evaluated what the information contains and what does that mean for the road if we were to leave it in the offset form. So certainly that has been done, and we've looked at it. And certainly it creates a significant concern for us in the future as traffic projections begin to increase in the area. So, again, it is one of the third highest collision rates of all intersections between Megan and Todd Lane, with Sprucewood and Normandy being above that. There's 22 collisions. It's the third highest on the entire stretch. So certainly we are taking that consideration we're taking that into consideration to solve some of those safety concerns. And that is, and what we are doing through this EA addendum process is the legal mechanism to change what was previously approved in 2009. So again, 2009, the final Buford intersection was to remain offset. It was based on the information that was contained in the 2009 EA document, and it was a decision that was made at that time to do that. So certainly we are following the proper process to recognize that we do need to do something there to address the safety of all the residents in the area. Certainly that was something that we carried through with respect to that. There is no misrepresentation and no lying that is going on. After the July 13th meeting on July 30th, we did provide 2 draft reports to Mr. Pizzulli and Mr. Ayatona. I will recognize that they are draft reports, and there are, I went through and reviewed the number of things that they were talking about, what was redacted in that draft report. Interestingly, there is 3 or 2 emails between the town, Stantec, and the Ministry of the Environment that was redacted in their entirety. Coincidentally, 10 pages later, that same email is there unredacted. So the information is contained within the report. We recognize that, and when we issue the final report, there's always going to be redactions in any of our public documents to remove personal information to meet privacy legislation. So certainly when we get into the final document, we will ensure that the redaction is proper and done, and everything that is available to be viewed by the public will be viewed by the public. So certainly we recognize that. That information was just sent off to Mr. Pizzulli and Mr. Ayatoni yesterday, because again, we weren't aware of that concern until their submission last week, Friday. So we have sent off an email, and I recognize that it was a late email yesterday kind of explaining that. Certainly they may not have had a chance to review that. Another component that was requested, and it was just requested last week, Friday, was the detailed collision data of the 22 collisions that we are referring to at the Buford intersection. Again, it was the first time we heard from Mr. Pizzulli and Mr. Ayatona in 8 weeks since we provided draft documents. So certainly we are working through that. We provided that to Mr. Ayatona and Mr. Pizzulli yesterday, again, recognizing it's a late submission. So they do have the information, and certainly we are available for any other concerns or information that they wish to have. They can simply make those requests to myself and or Stantec, the project team, and we will do our best to get that information to them in a timely manner. So certainly that is some of the matters. With respect to Professional Engineers of Ontario, I rather remain silent on that. Again, that is the association that I subscribe to as a professional engineer, and I respect whatever decision that they need to deal with respect to this. So if Mr. Pizzulli wishes to pursue that option, I'm certainly confident in providing whatever I need to provide should that occur. There's certainly no misrepresentation in any of the stuff that we did. I would be more remiss if I didn't bring forward a proposed solution for a known safety concern. I'd be more remiss for my duties on that side front with the professional engineers with a known safety concern, not bringing something forward to town council. So certainly, those are some of the information and responses to Mr. Pizzulli. Certainly, with respect to the other delegate, the written comments talk about the Bouffard Road realignment, and the sketches that you saw presented tonight are the same sketches that were part of the public consultation. So the realignment of Bouffard is still on place speak and shown in the resource section of the documents. And we haven't substantially changed any of the information from Public Information Center number 1. So the information and documents that are there are pretty substantially the same of what has been presented tonight. With respect, I think there was a discussion about speed radar signs. I think the presenter talked about them being on Malden Road, but the written presentation talks about Bouffard Road. Certainly, from time to time, the police do get concerns about speeding on various roads, and the police implement and put out these radar trailers to remind motorists of what their speed is, because again, motorists need that reminder to slow down, and certainly that is part of the police's the police department's mode to get some traffic calming throughout the area. So certainly that is hopefully addressing some of the concerns brought forward by the delegates.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Just to clarify, I think you stated that you had not heard from Mr. Ayatona or Mr. Pizzulli for the last 8 weeks, and you just heard last Friday. And I thought at our last meeting, we said we should let administration and the delegates get together. So I'm guessing there was no communication, no further meetings?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we provided information on July 30th in the form of draft documents. We received confirmation on July 30th that they were received. We reached out a number of times asking if they needed to review anything, if have any discussions a number of times in the last 8 weeks. We haven't heard anything back until the delegation submission on last week, Friday. So again, we tried to provide them as much information as we could when we knew they were asking for it, and try to provide some of that information. But that is what has occurred since July when we were at council last.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open it up to council questions, if any. Deputy Mayor Malash, then Councillor Renault.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. I have several questions and they're kind of all over the place, so I'm going to try to condense them as much as I can. Obviously, I was not on council in 2009, so I'm not sure of how the promise was made. Was it something that was documented that we would never need to realign this property? Just kind of trying to figure out how that conversation took place, or how it moved forward from that thought that we would never need to do this realignment, because we've heard from several residents who've been lifelong residents of LaSalle who can't believe it's taken us this long to consider realign that property. So I guess my question first would be, in 2009, how was this promise made and was it documented?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Malash. In 2009, the original, again, we got to this stage with council in 2009, and the final documents did show a realignment at Bouffard. That was what was being recommended. When they issued the notice of study completion back in 2009, there was communication that occurred between this resident and the town and the county and the consulting engineer at that time. There was what they called a Part 2 order request that occurred in 2009. The decision was made at that point in time based on the information they had, looking at their current traffic projections and traffic projections to what they saw within their report, that the intersection was going to remain in its offset form. So there is a formal letter that says we will leave the offset intersection in its form. And certainly that has happened, and that has happened since that time. Nothing has changed and the offset intersection has remained. Today, we are looking at this through an EA addendum process, and certainly we recognize that we went back to see what does the offset intersection have effects on today's traffic and looking out for a projection of 20 years from today. And certainly that causes us some concern. So the recommendation that we're bringing back before council is to realign this intersection at this stage and keep this moving forward so that we do provide that formal safety concern in addressing some of those safety concerns with respect to the Buford Malden intersection to properly have a final and aligned intersection there. So yes, there was a letter. Certainly it was acknowledged that the letter was sent. It is a letter that says it will remain in its current form. It was relied upon by Mr. Pizzulli at the time. It was relied upon by the Ministry of the Environment, and the Ministry of the Environment actually acknowledged and said that, for the town to do anything contrary to that is in contravention of the applicable legislation. So certainly we can't go in there and realign it without doing some sort of addendum or an EA process, and that's where we are today, to recognize that we need to do the realignment and not be in contravention of what was previously decided in 2009.
Thank you for the very detailed explanation. My next part, I think the majority of our community looks at this EA and probably applauds it, knowing that it's much needed. The bike lanes, the pedestrian safety, the cyclist safety, all those things are needed, especially the Ream Road intersection. I mean, the amount of times we hear from residents throughout the year about that dangerous intersection, actually more so than we do hear about Buford. So my question would be maybe to Mr. Welker, I guess, in the report, there was the do nothing approach. And my question is, forget the do nothing approach. If we were to do the Ream Road signalization, even though I prefer a roundabout, but I realize that requires land, the Ellis Road extension, would those two additions to the Malden Road EA without any changes to the Buford, would that assist with some of the problems we're seeing up into the 2041 time, or really is that not going to do the improvements that we need to be able to safely move our residents through our municipality?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, your worship. It's a good question. We did look at that. The network extensions on their own don't resolve the issues that you're going to see within this corridor, and are already starting to see through this corridor. So other improvements are necessary to Malden Road to be able to make it to function at an appropriate level of service in the long term. So yes, they help. Yes, the traffic signals help at that intersection, but it's not enough on its own to really improve things to the level that most people would expect through here. And really those extensions need to happen, as Peter mentioned, as the development occurs on the east side of Malden Road.
Peter?
Thank you. To further Mr. Welker's response, if council wishes to do the Ream extension and the Ellis Street extension, those are environmental assessments as well, because they do have to cross private property, and we do have to deal with a number of property owners through that area. So there is going to be, again, if those are the wishes and desires of council, we do have to do an environmental assessment. The plan and thought is as development occurs, we can build those through the Planning Act application as part of the development process and things of that nature. We get those right of ways conveyed to us. But if we want to go in prior to any development approvals, it would be at the sole cost of the town to do the appropriate environmental assessments and the appropriate expropriation of land to accommodate that road. So certainly trying to do those in advance of Malden Road, that would be the ultimate process for that. And we really struggled with trying to find a balanced approach, because again, without those extensions, Malden Road may be a lot wider, and that is not what we envision for Malden Road as well. So we're trying to do a bit of a balanced approach and deal with some of the traffic on Malden Road with the notion of, as development occurs, those other roads are part and parcel of where the development will occur. So we can garner those road extensions being built as part of the development process.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my concern more was, I guess, with the two intersections. those extensions are definitely something we need to look forward to in the future for sure. And I think it'll help alleviate some of that stress, because I can see that stretch along Ellis really being of assistance to some traffic getting through. But I was just wondering, like, if we had just continued with the Ream Road intersection, putting in the light, would that assist at all with the issue we have between Ream and Laurier? Just because there's not a ton of side streets between Ream and Bouffard, or really, I don't think there's any streets between Bouffard and Laurier besides Bouffard. So I was just wondering if doing just the one intersection, if that would do what we needed it to do. But I understand what you're saying is that that's not going to be enough to alleviate the traffic. Maybe not, maybe it'll be fine for now, but let's say 15 years down the road as development occurs off the Bouffard area. I'm understanding what you're saying about that. And then my last question would only be towards, and I assume it's not supposed to be part of this part, is just the cost that we're looking at for land, the Laurier and Malden intersection, to be able to line that the way we needed to. The cost for any additional widening of properties. At what point do we kind of get an idea of the property acquisition costs?
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, is typically once we get past the environmental assessment process, that we're really at what we call the preliminary design stage. We really like to, in my experience, I really like to bring it to the detailed design stage to really refine what those property requirements are. So do I need 3 meters or 3.2 meters across people's frontage? And I really want to have those finite numbers. And do I need all of somebody's property, part of it, and how is it negatively affecting them? So we would work towards carrying out detailed design. And then once we have detailed design, then we would progress through the appropriate means to acquire the property. It's a bit tough to give you an idea of what the property costs are because the market is changing and things of that nature. So when we're buying strips of land, it's a bit different of evaluation. When we're having to buy a whole property in its entirety, it's a bit different where it's fair market value plus a number of expenses. So that is how we would go about it. But certainly as we get through the detailed design process, that question becomes a little bit easier for us to answer because it starts to refine how much of properties and what properties do we need. So it's a bit tough for us to tell you what that is at this point, but certainly as we get through this and into detailed design prior to going out for construction, we would have to develop a comprehensive budget and council would have to ultimately approve that budget. So we would be providing that context at that point in time.
So just to clarify, as this point in time, not including the Ream or Ellis extensions, we're only looking at the one property that we're looking to fully expropriate. There's no other full properties. We're looking at strips.
No, there is strips along Malden Road. To get the Ream intersection to work, there's an extensive property requirement from the gas station there. If you look at the diagrams, you'll see the dashed line. There is extensive property required at the gas station there to make Ream Road work. So we would have to see how that would affect the operations of the gas station. Do we need to buy the entirety of the property? Those discussions occur at the time when we know what exactly is required. Certainly, there is the property at the Bouffard extension, at the Bouffard realignment that is required. Again, it's showing that where we can try to miss the house, but again, leaving the house there on the corner is not the most ideal location. So certainly that is something that we would have to work out with that property owner. And certainly there's another property, full property at the corner of Laurier. But the rest of it seems to be strips. Again, once we get into detailed design, there may be entirety of the property depending on how much we're taking and how close we get to the house. So those types of things have to kind of be worked out as we get into the detailed design.
Thank you. I think I just want to confirm that there weren't going to be any residents coming to us in a 30-day period, surprised that we were looking at taking their property or a piece of their property that they weren't in agreement with. And I know we've been to public, and it seems to not matter how many times we do that, we seem to hear from residents who said they had no idea what was going on. So I just want to be sure that everyone's aware.
On the properties that excuse me, on the properties that have some major impacts, when we had the public information center, they all received couriered letters to ensure that they did receive the information. So the properties that have major impacts, did receive courier letters from the town about what was going on and to visit the website. We had communication with some of them, and certainly when they see the notice of study completion, when we finalize that, we will be mailing that to all the same people on Malden Road. So there will be people that come and say they're surprised, but again, we try to give as much information when we can, and certainly we will have to deal with that as those people come forward, and that is certainly what that 30-day review period is for.
Thank you.
Councillor Renault.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will echo some of the comments by our deputy mayor. I think the majority of LaSalle has been talking about Malden Road for a long time. I was first elected to council in 2013, and that seemed to be a hot button topic. The traffic that was down Malden Road, how slow it moved, how congested it was. And if I remember correctly, there was actually a gentleman who ran for council that was basically his only concern, was that we were going to fix Malden Road. So recognizing that this is a long process, and recognizing all the work that administration had to do to get us to this point with the county and with the consultants, I applaud you. I do have a couple questions, and my first question, I will put it to Peter, but Peter, if you would like to defer it to Kevin, I understand. But there was a letter that was brought to the attention to some of the residents up and down Bouffard Road. It was not a town communication. This was some other communication that came from somewhere we don't know. And it basically said that the traffic volume, because of our work, the traffic volume along Bouffard in both directions would significantly increase, and that it would be a negative on their homes and their properties. And I just wanted to know the work that we're doing here in realigning Bouffard. Can you speak to those concerns? Are we creating a highway from Front Road to Huron Church, or are we basically, working with the same amount of traffic? It's going to be a little cleaner. Can you comment on that at all, please?
Certainly, thank you. Maybe I'll start, and if when I'm done, maybe if Mr. Welker wants to add something that maybe I missed through this. So certainly, we became aware of a pamphlet that was circulated, and in the pamphlet, it talks about the drastic increase in traffic on Bouffard Road. That Bouffard Road is now going to become an arterial road, and things of that nature. So certainly, Bouffard Road is currently classified as a local road. It has been classified as a local road for years, and it's still going to remain a local road from now and into the future. That is identified in our transportation master plan. The idea of realigning Bouffard at Malden is to create a safe access and egress for those residents who live on Bouffard Road. Now, can I say Bouffard Road will never see increased traffic? No, because again, when you look at the section of Bouffard Road between Malden Road and Disputed, it's all farmland that's prime for development. So certainly, as those lands increase and develop, there will be traffic that has to move around. Certainly, that is the means and the reason why we have a DOT extension, and the DOT extension is classified as a collector road to get people to move in a north-south direction in those areas. We also have the Ream Road extension, which will go all the way up to tie into Sanders West Parkway. So that will be a new collector road in an east-west direction. In addition to those, there's a second north-south collector road, which will be the future extension of LaSalle Woods Boulevard, where it creates a roundabout with Disputed Road. So that road will turn southerly and head south to move the traffic in and out of all of that new development area to keep the people off the local roads and onto the collector roads to get them to their destination. So as those areas do develop, certainly you are going to see traffic increase. There's about a third of Bouffard Road that's currently farmland that doesn't have any houses fronting it, and certainly that envision will probably end up being houses at some point in time when servicing is available and services are built. And certainly that in itself will just houses fronting Bouffard Road will cause traffic to use Bouffard Road. But we are doing a number of things to try to alleviate the concerns, because we don't want the people to use Bouffard. We don't want the people to use Disputed. Again, we're trying to get the people off of those roads, which would be considered local roads, and use the higher classification roads such as LaSalle Woods Boulevard, the Diot extension to Ellis, the Ream extension, which will all be built in a fashion as a collector road with less frontages on it, and hopefully less driveways as we review development plans and try to get those to do that. Again, we can't do everything. We can't get driveways off of those roads on their entirety, just depending on how lots lay out, but certainly where we can, we try to get flankage so we don't have driveways and things of that nature. So certainly that is what we are doing. And certainly the destination for a lot of these people is Malden Road. Malden Road does provide the connection to our only supermarket in a large commercial area, and in a high school as well, and a number of institutional establishments. So certainly the people are trying to get to Bouffard, get off of Bouffard onto Malden. So we're trying to create that intersection that will provide that safe movement for getting onto and off of Malden Road through this process. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. And Mr. Welker, I don't know if I skipped anything, but certainly please add anything.
Yeah, thanks. I think the only thing other thing that I would add is the other improvements that are happening on Malden Road as part of this document are the active transportation improvements. So one of the things that can happen is by creating a safe active transportation facility, you're going to encourage people to use alternate modes of transportation. And that's one of the things that's very important about this particular corridor, is trying to get people away from car usage as well. So we utilized growth numbers that were not excessive by any means. You know, we had identified, I think, 2% growth per year on Bouffard, 1% growth on Malden. So some of the transportation issues that we were seeing, the overlapping left turn lanes between, or left turn movements between Bouffard Road West and Bouffard Road East that are happening on Malden right now, those continue to get worse in the long run. So that's one of the main drivers for realigning this intersection. But again, if we're able to try to put in these safe active transportation facilities, that can encourage alternate modes to bring people downtown. So that's kind of one of the other things, I guess, to Peter's points.
Thank you, both gentlemen. Thank you. I guess one of the things that might have gotten lost in the report, because it wasn't necessarily looking at the intersection, was the ability to progress down what we'll call Old Bouffard. Old Bouffard, you're right, has a lot of farmland that's ripe for the development. And as those grow, I personally think if we don't realign as they grow, it's just going to cause more headaches and more problems for the people that live down there. I think the drawings that I've seen where you've made a couple cul-de-sacs there is very responsible, and it's very good for the people that are living down there. So most of I've got a list of questions, but most of them have been talked about. Why we're not doing roundabouts. I understand that with the property acquisition and some of the underground things that are happening out there. So I think my questions are done. I could just one last question to Mr. Walker. You've recommended 3 lanes over 4 lanes. Most people looking at it from a layman's eye would say, hey, 4 is always better than 3. I personally understand that there's going to be more property acquisition 4 versus 3. But you spoke in your presentation about how 4 lanes were nowhere near warranted. So I'm just wondering what that tipping point is, if we've got a road that's at almost capacity right now, we're adding a turning lane, those turning lanes, how much traffic is that taking off the road, and how much is that affecting? Are you talking 30%, 40% better flow just because they have somewhere to pull off and make that left-hand turn? I'm just curious about the 3 versus 4 lanes and where your recommendation came from.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. Through you, Your Worship. The traffic analysis that we did, we looked at a number of different growth scenarios, a number of different scenarios where we didn't include the network extensions, and we did not get to that tipping point, as you note, to go to the 4-lane cross section within that 2041 projected time frame. So, that sensitivity analysis, I think, is really what we looked at to try to determine, do we end up in a situation where we're right on the border right now in 2041 of going to 4 lanes? And the answer to that is no. When we looked at higher growth scenarios, we weren't seeing that tipping point met either. When we looked at not having these network extensions in place, we weren't there yet. It's not saying that it wouldn't be beyond the 2041 timeframe, but typically what happens beyond that is the traffic projections break down. So you don't really get a whole lot of confidence beyond that kind of a timeframe. It's hard to put a number, I guess, distinctly on the improvements made by the continuous 2-way left turn lanes. As you can imagine, if you're going down a 2-lane section right now and you get somebody who's waiting to turn left and there's tremendous volume coming the other way, they're backing up a lot of traffic in a fairly short period of time. So moving them out of that main flow of traffic does have a pretty significant improvement overall. One of the other things that I think Peter highlighted was the fact that this is a mixed-use corridor now. So trying to, as development of properties kind of moves forward, reduction of access points is going to be key to making sure that the corridor stays operating or functioning well. So those individual plans come in, that's one thing, a consolidation of entrances. Access management was another component for us. Right now, there's areas of semi-mountable curb throughout the corridor where you can pretty much drive over that curb wherever you want to. And so you get multiple access points rather than consolidating them to 1 or 2 particular locations. So all of those things combined, and all of those measures combined really does allow us to stick with the 3-lane cross section and see pretty solid performance in the long run. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have backups in those periods. You will, but they're not to the extent that it really justifies the extra property, the extra expense of going to a 4-lane cross section, which has its own problems when you start to bring in higher speeds because people are more comfortable in that open space.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. My final question for Peter. Peter, you talked about other full properties that could be impacted. You mentioned one in particular, the gas station. We know obviously of the one is the delegate. I just want to know what the future looks like for council input on this. I mean, if we approve this tonight, are we going to have any say over what properties get expropriated versus cut and expropriated? Or is this strictly going to be an administrative exercise after this? What role does council play in the future when it comes to acquisitions? Because let's face it, I mean, these are probably very highly contested from what we can see, and they will probably turn into expropriation type things. What will council play? What part will we play in the future of deciding how the property acquisitions go?
Mr. Mayor, I will start, and I see Dominic, Mr. DeDalt is on the call, so maybe he can provide a bit more on the expropriation method and things of that nature. So certainly, council has to ultimately approve any property acquisition for this development. And as we get into identifying what is actually required in the parcels and the pieces that we need from each individual property, we will again seek council's permission should council wish to proceed with improving Malden Road. That's really the only time when we need to go purchase property. Just by approving this document, it can show property being required, but we're not required to go purchase it until we need it. It's a bit again, there's a number of EAs that exist out there that have existed for decades, showing property requirements, and no action has occurred on them. So certainly action is required when we get into the matter of purchasing property. So certainly council approves all property purchases through various meetings, and certainly we will try to negotiate and deal with individual properties where we require pieces. Where it becomes tricky is if we're taking a piece and it really negatively impacts a property in its entirety, then we may be forced into expropriating the entire property, but we won't know that until detailed design. And so that's why I asked Mr. Dalt to come online. Maybe he can talk about what that means. I believe it's referred to as injurious infection. I may have said that wrong, but certainly the legal term would be best coming from Mr. Dalt, and certainly we would work through those processes. And as we get the updates of whether it's a piece of property or the entirety of the property, we would have to continuously come back and forth with council for that information. Mr. Dalt, do you have anything further to add?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll say Pete shouldn't be too hard on himself. He explained that pretty accurately in terms of what the process is here. So the EA process that kind of identifies what the property requirements are, and then at some point in the future, when it comes time to move to those next stages, whether we're talking Rian, whether we're talking Buford or any of these properties, that's when we, as administration through council's direction, would at least look to entertain the pre-expropriation negotiations. That's usually step one. Ideally, we have some sort of amicable purchase with any property owner. And then if that falls through, then we would proceed to the expropriation process with all the appropriate notices that are given, and begin the process that way. And then when Peter was talking about injurious affection, that speaks more towards compensation and what we'd be looking at in that respect, whether it's we have to acquire the entirety of the property or there's additional funds, I guess, to compensate for whatever losses would be incurred there by the property owner. But it would follow a similar, I mean, I know this group of council was involved with the waterfront, and I believe 2 of those properties were addressed through the pre-expropriation negotiation stage, that we were able to reach those amicable purchases. And then the remaining 2, we had to move through the expropriation process. So it would kind of, I would suggest, follow a very similar pattern. And if you need any more detail, I'd be happy to discuss further.
No, actually, your responses are great, and I understand through those responses that moving forward, when that realignment has to happen, the ultimate decision will be on council whether or not we expropriate or not at that point. But we are recognizing, if we accept tonight, we are accepting that it is necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I want to say to Peter and to Kevin, I really like most of this EA. I think the 3 lanes on Malden would be an excellent way to help with the traffic concerns that we have. My big concern is that one property. And I have just a really far-fetched question. I've been in different municipalities where they have offset signals. So I'm wondering, with Buford Road, God knows why it was never aligned in the first place, if there's something that could be done that way, an offset signal on Buford East and Buford West to help with the traffic flow. Kind of an out-of-the-box question, but it's just kind of there in the back of my head.
Thank you. Maybe I will start, and I know Mr. Welker has a bit more detail on this. So that is something that we tried to look at. If Buford Road was offset the other way, it would make it a lot easier for us to really review that option because we have overlapping, what we call overlapping left turn lanes. You can imagine trying to have a two-way left turn lane between those two sections, and cars are trying to turn one way and they're stopped and backed up. It's going to cause a little bit of a headache. The distance between them is a little bit more than what is required for an offset intersection and signalized. Again, we have an offset intersection at Todd Lane in Elmdale, and certainly that is within the confines. And again, you got a picture. The intersection, the leg of that intersection on the north side only has about 6 houses on it. So the demand on that side is very small. So to allow that to happen, it happens in basically a number of different stages for the signal. So when you have a typical intersection, there's 2 stages for the intersection, where one stage goes one way, it turns red and it opens up the other way. In this particular offset intersection, I believe there's 3, maybe 4 stages, and you're maybe waiting at the signal for a period of 2 to 3 minutes before you actually can get going again. And that's part of the problems of the way it's currently offset. So certainly we tried to look at that, and Mr. Welker, hopefully I kind of hit those timelines relatively what we discussed. Certainly, if you can provide a bit more detail regarding that.
Certainly. Yeah, so basically Peter's right. If the intersections were staggered the other way, you wouldn't get the overlapping left turn movements, and the queues that develop of cars waiting to turn left basically almost fills that gap that exists between those 2 intersections. The other issue is Palmer does come out in between those 2 intersections, and there's some entrances in there. So to create one signalized intersection with about 115-meter offset, it's not a great solution there. We did look at some other alternatives to try to reduce that offset as well. One of the issues that comes up a bit is driver expectancy. So when drivers are unclear what is actually happening at the intersection, you do tend to increase collisions as a result of that. So, a standard cross intersection where both legs line up on the sides, that's what drivers expect, not a large offset intersection. So to do something like that, you would end up either with 2 independent signals that are very close, spaced very closely together, where you're still having that issue with the left turn movement, and the other alternative of one large offset, one set of signals trying to function together. You're going to get a lot of confusion with that type of an intersection setup.
Thank you, gentlemen. Councillor Desjardins, answer your question?
More or less, yes. It was just kind of an out of the box, trying to find a solution because I don't like what we've got now. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other council questions? Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. This is a kind of like Councillor Desjardins, just kind of a question out of nowhere. If we were to approve this EA, it's saying that we approve what's been presented, but we don't necessarily have to move forward with certain parts of this. So as a whole, we are all in favor of this EA, except for it seems like that Bouffard area. If we were to approve this EA and we were to start with the Ream intersection, adding that signal, could this second part of this be applied years from now if we needed to, because the EA addendum would be in place? Is that a possibility, or does it have to be Bouffard before Ream, or how does that work?
Certainly, thank you. Similar to what we did in 2009, we did an EA that showed the entirety of the stretch of road that we're talking about, and we only carried out a portion of that improvement. Certainly, the time has lapsed, and we had to revisit the environmental assessment. So that's where we are today. Certainly, we certainly envision, and I think it could be noted that we envision the development of Malden Road to occur from the north to the south. So we will come from Normandy and work our way southerly. It is ultimately up to council. Again, $21 million is a pretty significant impact on our tax base. So certainly we need to work with council in terms of how much do we build and when do we build. Certainly, should this be approved, we would certainly come back with a bit of a projected schedule for Malden Road, talk about what should be in the budget, when things should be in the budget. So certainly we could build up to Huron Road and stop. Again, we recognize it would approve the EA, would approve that offset, but it really comes down to when do we need to carry that out. If we say council agrees and we build up to Huron and we stop and another 10, 15 years elapses, we need to revisit this again. So we will open this up again at that point to ensure what is happening at that time is appropriate and that it makes sense to carry on with the various aspects. So really it is governed by budgets coming forward on how much we build and where do we build to. But certainly the concentration for us administratively and from, I believe, council and the concerns from the residents is certainly the main component is Huron Road, including the intersection up to Normandy as a primary and primary phase of this work. And then beyond that, it really is driven by growth and development in that whole greenfield area. And that's really those things are going to be the triggers. And we hope at that time we're getting some of these other road extensions built as part of development processes and things of that nature. So certainly that is kind of the timeline that we currently envision, but certainly it's really driven by what council approves from a budgetary standpoint on how much we build and where we build to.
Thank you. I appreciate that because that assists in knowing, like you said, we're starting more towards Normandy end and working our way down. The development off of Bouffard, it could be 15 years away before we really see that heavy traffic coming from the Laurier area and needing to worry about the accidents that occur at that intersection. So it's good to know that it's not necessarily that we need it right now. We can see how the rest of this project progresses before we move to that. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, no more questions. Yep, Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. Based on the information that's been given and the answers to the questions, I would like to move that we receive this report and we approve in principle the EA addendum report, and so that we can move this to the next step.
Thank you, Councillor Reno. Support. Deputy Mayor Malash. All in favor? Opposed, if any? It passes. Thank you. Thank you to the delegates and Mr. Mara and Mr. Welker. Very good detailed presentation. Okay, item E2, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. You can see the report before you. Any questions, comments? Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. I just want to thank administration for bringing this forward. I think it's important that our municipality recognizes this day, and hopefully our staff will use it as an educational day as well. Thank you. I will move the motion.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Reno, then Mrs. Spagnuolo, and then Mrs. Desjardins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think probably like my colleagues, we're probably resoundingly ready to second that motion. I applaud the town for taking a step forward above and beyond the provincial mandate and for doing the right thing. This issue is something, is close to many people's hearts, whether they're right involved or not. The tragedies of the past just can't seem to be dealt with in the present well enough, and the town has gone over and above. So thank you very much, and I will be seconding the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Reno. Councillor Spagnuolo.
Through you, I was just going to applaud administration as well for going above and beyond, and I approve this motion as well.
Thank you. Councillor Desjardins. Same. Administrations get a lot of kudos. You can't see him, but Mr. Militia's smiling. Okay. No, you want to speak on?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just thank you again. We are proud to recognize this day. I mean, assuming that council does agree with the recommendation. We are working, again, just as a result of the timing and some of the other pressures we've been under, particularly with respect to the pandemic. There's probably not as much that we would like to do, both for the public. So we're trying to put out some information as to how our staff as well as the public can recognize this days. And sometimes it's as simple as wearing an orange shirt. And as much as that may sound a little silly to some, it does recognize and bring awareness to the issue. And I think that's one of the prime things that the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations do, is to bring awareness to the issue, to recognize and honor the survivors and their families as we go through this process. We're hoping that in future years we'll have a little bit more time to prepare, and we'll have a little more activities that we can partner with the school systems as well as some of our other partners in the community to offer more by way of honoring the survivors and their families. So we do certainly hope that again this gains some traction, and that we do really do think about our past and perhaps just a dark segment of our past, but certainly do recognize that. We look forward also to the waterfront, where we have recognized our Franco-Indigenous past in our recent history here, and look forward to how we can integrate this day as part of the celebrations down on that site. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good comments from everyone on the recommendation. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, administration. Item G1, summary of reports to council. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, supported by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. G2, vaccination or rapid test policy and vaccination passport certificates. You've read the report, Mr. Milish. Anything to add?
Yes, this area is one that traditionally has been moving rather quickly. We did issue this as part of an addendum to the agenda on Friday, and we recently got news, I believe it was yesterday, where the rules have yet again changed. I would suggest that one of the things throughout the pandemic is that change has been pretty constant throughout this whole pandemic, and we expect that probably further refinement on the rules to occur in the coming days, weeks, and months. Again, we do, I just wanted to bring council's attention to the two appendixes to the report. One is our internal vaccination and rapid test policy, which applies to all our staff. Again, we do have that out, and again, are receiving the majority of our staff are complying with that. So we're very happy with the results that we're getting on that. And again, one of the questions that we get quite often by the public with the institution of the vaccine passport / certificate program through the province is, well, you're asking me, what about your staff? How am I sure that your staff is not vaccinated or is COVID negative? And so our policy does address that. So we do have that in place, and it's been the first few days actually through the implementation of the passport program has been positive. We've had some educational conversations with some of our patrons, but for the most part, by and large, they've been relatively positive that we've seen, and that's a testament to the users, particularly the Vollmer Center and our center here at the Civic Center. We do, as I mentioned, we have been following the provincial policies and guidelines with respect to the proof of vaccinations at our recreation center as well as at our civic center. Those rules have just recently changed. I believe that we either just have or will shortly be issuing a media release with respect to the new rules in case those are not aware. But generally speaking, at the recreation center, anyone that is beginning on Friday, I believe, anyone 12 years of age and older will be required to show proof of vaccination, which is a little different than what the provincial regulation has indicated. We have had some questions in terms of how that can happen. Certainly the local health unit as well as the local medical officer of health has it within their mandate, within the legislation, that they can provide increased restrictions as they deem necessary. So We will be abiding by those regulations as we go through and ask once again for the patience of the public as we try to implement these changes as quickly as we can and get folks to understand what those changes are. We understand that our user groups are communicating with their members as well as to the changes. So we look forward to working in partnership with our user groups to try to get the message out in terms of this ever-changing landscape. So with that, I'd be open to answer any questions that members of council may have.
Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Militia. Okay, so just for some clarification, if I can. My understanding is 12 years old, you need to be vaccinated to get into the Vollmer. So my concern, I guess, and a lot of parents' concerns, and every member of council probably heard the same thing. If you're 11 years old, you turn 12, you can't get in because you're not double vaccinated. Is that a mistake, or am I mistaken, or is that accurate? Like, say, next week I turn 12, I'm 11. Now I can't play for a month because I got to wait for 2 shots. Is that accurate?
So as far as I understand, if you are currently 11 years old, you're not required to show proof of vaccination.
Right.
I believe, and I may ask Ms. Fernaro if she is on the screen to pop in, because she's a little more familiar with the rules at the Vollmer, and here she is now. So she'll be able to clarify exactly how the rules work with that transition of age perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm not entirely sure someone that turns, I can tell you till the end of this year. So children who were born in 2009 were eligible as of mid-August. If they had not yet turned 12, they were eligible to begin getting vaccinated. So those children will be required. But when we get into the new year, there has not been any specific clarification provided just as of yet when a child turns 12 and they're eligible, how soon after they turn 12 that they have to provide that. So we hope to clarify that either through the local health unit or through agencies like Parks and Recreation Ontario that can provide further clarification on that.
Okay, so just so I'm following you, there is an opportunity as an 11-year-old to get a shot before you turn 12 then, right? Is that what you just said?
There currently is, yes.
Okay, so if they don't do that, then the policy is the policy. It's unfortunate, but I think you still need to follow through so that they can make sure that their child still gets a chance to play when they turn 12, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. And I won't bother council with the motion later on. Thank you.
Councillor Carrick, we will bring that concern forward. I'm sure that the health unit is hearing that concern from many, but we will bring it forward. We do have a bi-weekly meeting with the health unit, and also an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback throughout in the interim period. So we will provide that feedback back to the health unit. That again, what I'm understanding your question to be around is that whole the transition and implementation of the requirement for the proof of vaccination when you're 11, 12, and in that transition period, and particularly with the Friday time period that we're getting.
Yes, thank you. That would be great.
Councillor Ekpata.
Through you to Mr. Militia or Ms. Finero. I've raised this question before, and it was raised again to me earlier today. My daughter, I'll use a personal example. Hockey player, 15, doesn't have any ID, but is vaccinated. So to confirm who she is, what direction will we be taking?
Again, I believe that the proof of identity, again, the photo ID is no longer required. It's never been required. But again, I'll turn to Ms. Fernaro, who will be better apt to answer that particular question.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So in terms of identification, it does not have to be a photo ID, as Mr. Militia stated. It does need to be something with the child's name and birth date. And we are accepting forms of identification that have been photocopied. So if you could provide a photocopy to her of her birth certificate or her health card, that would be sufficient.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. Thank you very much for all these changes you guys have made to these policies. It's very frustrating for, I'm sure, administration as much as it is for the public, where the changes come in from one week to the next, and teams are trying to be formed and people are trying to figure out what their kid is able to do and not to do. So thank you for staying on top of it as much as we could. Also, I really wanted to applaud you for presenting a policy for our staff that gave them an option. having that option to have the rapid test is something that I think many of our staff members do appreciate. And I know other municipalities went the opposite direction. So thank you for putting that forward for our employees and giving them that option. That may change too. Province may come down and give us different guidelines eventually, and I'm sure they will. But for now, I think it's a great policy that's been put forward. And real quick, I'm just going to add on something because I heard you say you're talking to the health unit. We've had residents reach out to us to see if the municipality would be somewhat supportive of voicing our concern about our high school and grade schools not being able to participate in sports. So maybe we can put a little word in for them saying, we're able to do it at the municipal level and we're able to do it safely. Let's try to get our high schools and grade schools there as well. So if we can somehow say something positive to the health unit when we speak to them, that would be appreciated.
We will pass that message along to the health unit. I know we are getting that question as to how we can support the local high schools and grade schools in terms of their sports activities. I will say, I mean, again, the health unit's in a very difficult position. They're trying to, they're responsible for public health. And sometimes that comes at the cost of some of what we now know are as liberties, but we took for granted for many, many years. So again, they are trying to do the best that they can. I will also say, I just got a quick notification that the health unit website does provide some information on youth vaccinations. So for those that are listening online or that will see the YouTube presentation a little later, and those that contact members of council, please provide them that information. That the health unit website does provide some information on vaccination, on youth vaccinations, which will be helpful as we go forward. I will echo the concerns that we try to create a balanced policy. We'll see again what rules will get imposed on us in the future. I will say that my prediction was Friday was going to be the change of rules that happened on Monday, so that was a little earlier than I expected. But compliments to the staff. Certainly, the staff at the Walmart have had to shift and pivot. I don't know how many times to try to get things up and running. I know we've had probably more start-stops than I care to remember, and bringing staff back. And again, Ms. Fernaro and her team have done an incredible job of trying to staff the location, particularly with what we have going on and the changing rules. And we've had a really open line of communication, particularly with our major user groups, and they've been very cooperative, very collaborative in trying to find solutions that work for them and work for us. We've been very fortunate to work with Mike Segan, who is the president of LaSalle Minor Hockey, and trying to get some of that find that middle ground to what is a good solution for everyone involved. We have to recognize that we all are beholden to the province. I know that some folks out in the community believe that we should just not follow the rules. Unfortunately, that's just not an option. The rules are there to be followed, and we must do that, and that's just an obligation that we have as a municipality. So we're looking forward to having a little bit of leeway. I will bring those questions and comments forward to the health unit as we go forward, and perhaps they can give that some consideration as they develop their and review some of their policies.
Thank you, members of council, for the questions, and thanks to Mr. Militia for clarifying that. I think everyone is receiving a lot of emails, comments relating to don't do what the province tells you. So it's nice that Mr. Militia explained that there be more rules to be imposed on us, and we have to follow the rules. It's simple as that. So people think we can just say, no, we're not going to follow it. And I'm glad he clarified that. Do council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Reynolds, support by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. On the bylaws, just want to be clear, we will not be reading 8613, which is the bylaw to authorize the lands for second fire station, nor will we read 8615, which is the bylaw to confirm the donation of lands. So it'll be 8614, 8616, 8617, and 8618. On all three readings, all four bylaws. Councillor Reno, Councillor Dicho Spagnolo, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Council questions? None. Statements by council members. Reports from committees. Oh, Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. My statement actually goes out to our students and youth who work for the town of LaSalle. I know they've had a very rough week or so, and I just want to applaud them all and thank them all for trying to handle these situations as best they can. I know we always thank administration for the policies and things put forward, but I thought knowing I have a young person out in the workforce who's dealing with some of these issues, that I definitely wanted to say thank you to our staff, especially at the Valmer, who are experiencing things they've never experienced before, but will only make them stronger workers. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Malash. Councillor Ekpata.
If I may, your worship, might I ask Mr. Militia a question?
Sure.
Mr. Militia, I've been, through my other job, I've been made aware of a Northern Police Service that has been hit by ransomware. Without going into our security protocols, can you speak to how we keep LaSalle's infrastructure safe to the level that you're comfortable, sir?
Well, thank you for the question. And this has been a growing topic for municipalities and government organizations over the last probably 5 years or so, more predominantly. We have instituted a number of safety protocols, enhanced firewalls, enhanced security features. We routinely go through staff exercises where we test staff in terms of phishing exercises and things like that to make them aware. We have a number of training programs that we advise staff of and require staff to go through with respect to how to prevent ransomware from entering into the system altogether. I will say that we over the last probably 3 or 4 years, we have had a number of phishing exercises coming from outside the organization that we've been able to stop. In fact, we had one today, as luck would have it, that we're able to stop as well. So, a lot of it is awareness by the staff, training of staff to understand what is real and what isn't. A lot of times it's as simple as picking up the phone and saying, I don't understand what this is about. And the answer usually on the other end of the phone line is, well, I didn't send that. So there is a lot of quite simple solutions, but require some individual contacts. I will say that at times, and I will be the first to admit, it gets a little bit frustrating because there are so many rules in place and so many procedures in place, but it is for our own safety. It's for our own safety. It is the safety of the information that we hold, which we try to protect to the greatest degree possible. Our IT manager, Nick DeJesu, who is in the back controlling a lot of the audio and video tonight, does an incredible job of implementing and staying on top of it. He has a team of IT professionals that really look at that. This is, if not the top job, it is almost at the top of the job to keep our security up and running and safe with respect to that. There may be a day that we do get hit. As much as we try to put every security option in place, many places have and unfortunately have also been hit. We are trying our best to keep that information safe and keep out of the ransomware headlines, as you will. I mean, there are pretty devastating. If you go through and do a quick Google search, it's pretty devastating what you see the city of Atlanta went through, and even locally here in Ontario, there's been a number of municipalities that have gone through that. So we have implemented a number of safety protocols. We continue to do that as part of the 20, and Mr. Ferraro has alerted me just through email here, as part of the 2020 modernization program, we did go through a cybersecurity audit, which identified some of our areas of improvement, which we're starting to get to and improving those areas. So we have done a lot, particularly in the last probably 24 to 36 months, to try to protect ourselves to the greatest degree possible with the resources we have available. So it's a long-winded answer, but it's an important one, and I'm glad you brought it up, because we are trying our best to get through that, and sometimes the security levels that we have in place may seem overwhelming to the users, but they're there for a reason, and we need to protect those, and keep those in place to the greatest degree possible.
Thank you, Mr. Militia. Thank you for your indulgence, your worship.
You're welcome, Councillor Akpata. Notices of motion. Confirmatory bylaw, first reading. Councillor Dicho Spagnolo and Councillor Deputy Mayor Malash, all in favor. That carries. Second reading, Councillor Reno, Councillor Desjardins, all in favor. That carries. And third and final reading, Councillor Carrick and Councillor Akpata, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. See you next meeting. Thank you for viewing, audience. Everybody